Rob Lawrence, thank you very much. I'm always blown away by the curves and the population issues that you show us. And it, to me, is just, again, how could we possibly not think that this is what we should be doing? And so then the question of how do we do that in the hospital? And your third point about the sustainability, for me, I take that as the sustainability in our society and in our communities and how much it costs us, whether that's time or money or whatever it is, to actually accomplish that. Because that's our goal, is to accomplish supporting moms, to accomplish the steps you wanted them to do very early on so that they can then have that exclusivity. And I think that's the question we're asking is, what do we do in every situation, in every hospital, every birthing center, wherever we're doing it, and who should we really be training so that they are accessible 24 hours a day, because it will be a big problem if you don't solve it quickly. And how do you work that training? And not only how do you work that training, you suggested lactation consultants, but anybody to continue that teaching in that process. We had the three, we had PEDS, we had ACOG, and we had family practitioner programs that teach a tremendous number of residents every year, and yet they're missing out, and they're not part of that, and so in the future they won't know. So it's really about how do you involve all of those people at that juncture and doing it. I don't know the answer. I just think it's how do we bring it to bear and have it be financially and time-wise and continued success in the future.
Yeah. Well, if we want prevention and if we want accessibility and we don't have all the resources to hire a stable full of lactation consultants to be there round the clock, it seems to me we have only one option, and that is our nurses. But if you have nurses who, and I have to say that like many things in my own life personally, I've learned much more from my failures than my successes. And one of our huge failures when I was the director of breastfeeding medicine at Stanford was we did a fabulous job of getting a policy in, of training over 380 nurses, I mean, probably overtraining them. And then, because we didn't do the linchpin step, it was so easy for nurses to go back to referring. And it was so easy for lactation consultants to, again, restrict the number of their beneficiaries by just doing one-on-one with the mother without the nurse there. So I think that there really has to be sort of a real shake-up in the way that we handle things to keep a system sustainable if you're going to put a lot of money into it to begin with. But if you have, well, I should probably leave it there. What I would say, I wanted to tell you one other thing. When I was a resident, one of the people that I learned the most from in the NICU were the nurses. And I have a feeling if we had really, Ruth used the word disenfranchised nurses, but if we could re-franchise those nurses and really make them skilled again, I have a feeling that that would be just a valuable resource to train physicians as well.
Thank you both for your fascinating presentations. First, a disclaimer. I am not a physician, a nurse, or a lactation consultant. So I am a grandmother of 8 and mother of 4. So I've had a lot of life experience. And this leads to my question, which maybe is coming from a position of ignorance. I totally agree with you about the significance of having nurses at the bedside helping the mother and baby start this difficult process of adjusting to one another. What I don't understand is that if you're talking about the first 3 days or maybe even 2 days that the mother is in the hospital, she is still producing the colostrum, the early milk. It's when she goes home, when whatever you call it, the later milk or the real milk or whatever, floods into her breasts, that there is a new challenge to mother and baby. And the nurses are not there, and the lactation consultants maybe are there, but often are not. I understand the significance of starting the process in the first 2 or 3 days, but I can't understand how that operates way into the future. So the question is, who helps the mother and baby the first night at home, or the first middle of the night at home, or the first morning? So that's my one question. My other question is, I was a little concerned when you spoke about using videos to limit the amount of time that the nurse spends with the mother, because I think that it's that interpersonal help and support and teaching that is critical, and that a video cannot substitute for that, in my view. So those are my questions.
Well, they're both excellent questions, especially from a grandmother. So what I would say to the first is that the ABCs talk about getting the baby on comfortably and effectively for A, and B is breast milk production, and the American Academy of Pediatrics and the World Health Organization both strongly recommend that every single mother learn how to use her hands, again, much more effective than a pump, to express milk for 3 reasons. The first is to help stimulate her production. The second is to ease the pressure on perfecting the baby's attachment. And the third is to help soften or empty the breast when other measures are less available or effective. So this is something she needs to learn before she goes home. And C are very simple parameters that she gets to learn that indicate whether her baby is getting enough. So she goes home on the 3rd day, and suddenly the drama begins. She wakes up at 2 in the morning, her breasts are full and hard. She knows, she's got her hands right there. She knows how to soften her breasts, get the milk flowing, and get the baby on. She's taught skills that will sustain her until she gets help. I agree, she needs help. But she's taught the skills that are going to get her through those first bumpy hurdles. The second point you made was a really good one. Now I've forgotten it. That shows how old I am. Oh, the videos, yes. The reason that right now what happens is that the nurses are just massively busy. And the reason they'd much prefer to refer to lactation consultants is because they're so busy. So I really respect that. I get that. So, and it also, the reason that I even made those videos to begin with is because as a physician, I wanted to abbreviate the amount of time that I spent at the bedside because time is precious. And I got kind of actually tired of saying the same thing over and over and over again. So if they just sort of get some basics down and then I can come in and polish things off, that's much easier. So I'm not saying to replace anything. I'm just saying that some of these technologies can be optimally utilized to both help the mother and the baby, not that they take the place for more personalized care.
You also acknowledge that the professional providing the information may not appear like or speak like the mother themselves, and they could potentially identify with somebody else from their own culture, from their own background, being able to see that represented and demonstrated.
No, I think many times someone that has fairly large pendulous breasts may not relate to a video of some woman with very small breasts and so forth. So I think that there's a way of seeing that either the person that you're looking at, exactly how you handle it, because it might be slightly different from one mother to the next. Of course it is.
I'm Rachel Abramson from Health Connect One, and I think for me, it's very significant that the two of you are sitting there, and both of you presented extremely interesting data that has to do with time and timing. So when you talked about the fact that breastfeeding success is exquisitely or time sensitive, and then we think about those growth charts over time, and the sweep of time is also critical to breastfeeding success. And I think I'd like to take what Isadora brought up just a little bit further, in that we know that those first 2 or 3 days are exquisitely important in terms of timing, but we also know that once the mother gets home, life is overwhelming. So if we are going to be focusing on prevention, accessibility, and sustainability, we can't only focus on the hospital and the systems that work in the hospital. We have to think about who is back at home, and considering the diversity of mothers and babies, I would suggest that we need to think with an equity frame, or a frame that focuses on disparities. Those mothers and babies who have the least support, we should be investing in that support back in the community. So that means you start with the system of lactation consultants and nurses and the training of very simple, clear messages, but then you make sure that somebody is back there with them in their communities, from their communities. There at midnight, if you need to call, those people are breastfeeding peer counselors and community-based doulas. So a plug for the consideration of those community-based resources in that whole system.
Absolutely. I would say that one of the invitations I get most frequently to speak is from WIC, and because they have found the information very translatable to precisely the care that they would like to provide.
We'll have one last question.
To your point, I mean, one of the reasons we saw those 80% success rates, where everything went right for 80% of the women, in the sense that they were able to complete the study, was because we did precisely what you suggested. There was a 24-hour service, 7 days a week, available to each of the participants.
Hi, Jennifer Matrenga. I'm the clinical director at Baby Friendly. We answer individual questions all the time about safety, and of course we respond, safety is of utmost importance. I liked your 3-step approach and think it could be easily woven into the multidisciplinary team working on the 10 steps. I'm wondering if you've heard of or had experience with, from ARC, team steps. I've seen some great success in doing something similar. So that is for all disciplines in the hospital, for all services. Team steps helps facilities with communication. In emergency, there's SBAR. The CUS is communicate, I'm uncomfortable in a situation. Timeout, huddle, as you mentioned. So I just wanted to mention that, and I've seen some great success with ensuring the safety, implementing the 10 steps, because we all know if we don't want to go 1 step forward, 10 steps back, if one situation happens that isn't safe. It's such a huge cultural change to implement the 10 steps. So I just wanted to mention that. I've seen some great success with the ARC's team steps.
Thank you.
And Dr. Garza, did you have any problems in your global study? What did you do with mothers who didn't have enough milk? Or did all of them succeed?
Did we have problems? Yes, we had problems. I spared you the problems. key design feature of the studies was doing precisely what Janet was suggesting in terms of in-hospital. I can't recall that the failure rate in any site was more than 20%. Maybe in Brazil it was 30%, where in fact a lot of issues did emerge the first 3 to 5 days. In many of those instances, I suspect what women did was just to drop out the second day of the study. But there was no way of documenting that. The vast majority, however, because they had access to the sort of support systems we've been talking about, succeeded from pretty much day one.
So you had a built-in support service that went beyond hospitalization.
Oh no, it was part of the study,
Yeah.
and there was quite a bit of reluctance of many of the pediatricians when we were mounting the studies in these 6 countries, and by the time that the studies were over, they were lobbying to continue the support system that the study was providing. But it was a Cadillac version. I mean, it was quite literally someone was carrying a cell phone around in each of those cities, responding to women's questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Well, we need to tear a page from that book because our challenge is still what happens when they go home from the hospital.